I just want to go back to fair treatment, right? So our campaign has two main goals. It's the decriminalisation of personal use and possession of drugs and increased investment in treatment and harm reduction. And really underpinning all of this is a commitment to combating stigma and trying to create an open, honest, and more compassionate conversation about drugs and people who use drugs. And we're going to continue to advocate on this. It's what our partnership of 74 organisations has been built on. Our commitment to those two aims are central to the work that we do. But in the context of the summit and when we do campaigning, what we have to sort of do is cut down some of the solutions and outcomes that align with our campaign, that we feel are technically and politically possible, that we feel are backed by evidence and that are supported by members of our reference group and other stakeholders, but the outcomes that we think are going to have impact. And from here, we've kind of developed our wish list, short list, right? We don't want it to be too long. We want to be realistic about what we think we can achieve, but also ensure that what we're asking for we feel is going to be impactful. And I really want to say up front, it's really important we say this, that our partners and other organisations across the sector and the community will have their own asks and priorities based on their strengths, their constituency and members, and their expertise. And we'll be campaigning for these in the lead up to the summit. And we will absolutely be backing them in as much as possible, whilst also working on sort of what our key priorities are. And any of those points of alignment and coming together, I think, are going to be really, really powerful as a sector in helping us get those outcomes that we want to see. So in terms of what fair treatment is kind of asking for, in terms of what we want to see practically come out of the summit. So firstly, we want to see law and policy settings that enable a health-based response to drug use and dependency. And what that looks like in reality is the removal of criminal penalties for personal possession and use of drugs. And what we want to see is an enhanced and effective early drug diversion initiative scheme. So EDDI, we like to call that scheme. That came into effect in February this year, and that was part of the government's response to the ICE inquiry. It's a two-strike diversion scheme. And we think that was a really positive move in the government and certainly a great step forward. But there are flaws in that scheme. And so what we want to see is that enhanced a version of that and expanded. And really what the summit is an opportunity to do is to identify what is a best practice and evidence-based diversion decrim model for New South Wales. And we can learn from EDDI that came in February, what's working, what's not. But we should also be looking elsewhere. We want to look at ACT and Queensland models and get the basic principles right. So for any law reform model in New South Wales, the principles must be that there are no fines, no limits on strikes and chances, that everyone is eligible, that we have increased pathways to treatment and support and removal of things like stop and search powers. So that's the law reform ask that we have pulled together for the summit. Secondly, what we want to see is more drug education and harm reduction strategies for people who use drugs. That's a very long sentence, I know, but we've tried to capture everything in that one go. And what that looks like in reality is more safe injecting facilities across New South Wales. We know the incredible record and the evidence that MSIC has shown in King's Cross about the difference that has made. It is a life-changing and a life-saving service. So what we are seeking out of the summit is an amendment to the Drug Use and Misuse and Trafficking Act to allow for more than one licence to be issued for more than one premises. We have one service in New South Wales. That's our MSIC. It is the sole licence holder. But we know that there are overdoses happening across our state. And so we need more services like MSIC where it's needed. We also are advocating for the introduction of site and mobile drug education and checking services to keep people safe. And this is something we absolutely stand alongside our partners with in advocating for, particularly in this moment where we are looking at this nitazenes crisis in New South Wales. And finally, we want to see increased funding for AOD treatment services. It's a real no-brainer, and particularly with a focus on addressing unmet need. And we absolutely lean on our partners in the space who know so much about this, who are working in the front line. We want the summit to address known gaps in treatment, particularly because we know that there are the gaps. And there are gaps, the focus we think should be on rural and regional communities, or culturally and linguistically diverse communities, including services in Western Sydney, culturally appropriate services for First Nations people, more treatment services for priority groups, And things like short-acting injectable opioid treatments, increased availability of substitution treatments like methadone and buprenorphine, and increased availability of naloxone, including for police. And again, that is particularly important because of what we're seeing happening with nitazenes in New South Wales. And in addition to all of this, we really want to see the introduction of a whole of government AOD strategy. It was one of the recommendations that came out of the ICE inquiry, and we think that will hopefully lead to better decision-making and more holistic solutions down the track to bring it all together. Now, obviously, there is so much more to be done. And again, this is our shortlist, and they're not the only things that we care about. And again, acknowledge that our partners will be advocating on things outside of that list.
Yeah.
So really what we want to see, thank you, Michaela, is each and every one of you on the call tonight feel that you have a role to play and something to do. And I want to reiterate that because we have a real job ahead of us in these next few months, and we need you. We need all of you to act with us and do everything we can to make sure that this thing is the real deal. So on our website, we have a page which we will share with you where we have been putting together all the tools and guides to help you take one or more of the following actions. Based on what Michaela mentioned before, the sentiment we're hearing, and I've been having a lot of meetings with rural, regional and metropolitan MPs from across the political spectrum. And what we need to do is write to our local MPs, request to meetings, and tell them you want them to attend the summit when they're invited, represent you, participate, represent your electorate, and push for the outcomes you want to see. So there's sort of two things. You want to tell your MP, I want you there. I want you taking a seat at that table, and I want you to represent our community. And number two, I want you to tell that MP, tell your MP what you told us in your breakout room just now. What are the changes you want to see? Remembering, let's have high expectations here. Let's go in assuming that anything is possible and put that to your MP. I hope each and every one of you will put an email together, write a letter, make a phone call. They need to know that their electorates, that their voters want them in those rooms across that drug summit. We also want you to have your say and to have a conversation. So we understand that New South Wales Health will be establishing a Have Your Say page, which will welcome written submissions, and that will be open from October 4th. So as soon as we have that link and we know that page is live, we'll send that out through our whole list and all of you will receive that. And what we want you guys to do is to flood that page with your asks, with the things that you want to see. We want you saying decrim, decrim, decrim. We want to hear you say treatment, address the treatment gaps, address stigma. We want more harm reduction. We want more M6. All of the solutions you talked about just now, flood that page with what you want to see. And having your say might also look like doing things like writing the letters to the editor of your local newspaper, which surprisingly can actually make an impact and have quite a big reach. And I cannot stress enough about the power of a conversation. I want you to talk to members of your family, to your colleagues, to people at your church about why you want to see change. Likely a lot of them don't know what the drug summit is and that there's even a drug summit happening. Talk to people about it. Tell them the story about what happened in 99. Share about why this matters to you. And really the way that we convince the people around us is by drawing on our shared values and those stories. So when I talk to my family about drugs, I often reflect on my children and the things that I want to see for them, society I want them to grow up in, and a space and a world where they feel safe to come to me and where they're not burdened down with shame and stigma. People's minds that we have the most likelihood of changing are those we have existing relationships with. So think about your network and talk to them about what's going on and why change is important. And to help you get started, we'll have our website, as I said, that'll have lots of tips and effective language that you can use. And we'll also be running an interactive workshop to support you to have those conversations. And you can apply some of the learnings in that in conversations with family, but also with your MPs too. So save the date. We're going to have that on October the 17th, and we'll send through an invitation. We'd love to see you all there. And for those hailing from an organisation, which I know a lot of you are, we really want you to talk to your colleagues. And if your org is happy to step out and speak on this, do so. You're all part of lots of like multidisciplinary networks. Talk about the Drug Summit and reflect on why your organisation has a stake in this. So as Uniting, we run a lot of social services organisations, and we actually don't have a big AOD footprint other than MSIG. But we work with families, we work with vulnerable communities, and we know that this is important for the people that we serve. Think about how that connection's made with your organisation.